welcome to Hardtalk India. With both India and Pakistan supporting America's war against terrorism, it was perhaps inevitable that their subcontinental differences would come to the surface. This week, as the American campaign in Afghanistan hits a flat pitch, both the Prime Minister of India and the President of Pakistan are visiting this country. But can Washington hope to keep Islamabad and Delhi on the same side without damaging its war aims? Here to answer that question and many others is the U.S. National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice. Dr. Rice, let's start first with your country's strikes against Afghanistan. They've been going on for a month. What exactly have you achieved?
The President has made very clear to the American people and to the members of the coalition that our aims are absolutely clear. We intend to disrupt and eventually destroy the al-Qaeda network, to make certain that Afghanistan can no longer be used as a base for terrorism, and hopefully to leave a more stable Afghanistan so that Afghanistan's neighbors can feel a sense of security.
But 4 weeks after the campaigns began, Osama bin Laden continues. He's there. He's not been displaced. The Taliban are still in power. Is that a sign that things aren't going right?
No, 4 weeks is not very long, and the President made very clear early on that this was going to be a long campaign. And let me say that there is the military action with which we are very pleased, with the direction that it is going, with what we are achieving. I think you would be hard-pressed at this point to find a major al-Qaeda military camp where they train these terrorists, where al-Qaeda feels comfortable going and training terrorists. I think that you see Osama bin Laden on the run from place to place. And I want to speak to something else that has nothing to do with the military campaign, but that has to do with the campaign in a broader term. We are disrupting this network worldwide because we have a unity of work from intelligence services around the world that it is making it difficult for the cells that have developed in 60 different countries to work. We really believe that we're having a major impact on disrupting the campaign of terror.
You see, you speak about your success. You sound confident, you sound enthusiastic, and yet public opinion in Pakistan says that the world's most powerful nation has been bombing for 4 weeks the world's poorest, and they still haven't been able to defeat it. Is there a sense here in which this delay, this 4-month campaign that hasn't ended by removing the Afghan government, is becoming a little embarrassing?
Absolutely not. The United States is doing, with its coalition partners, an amazing job of going after terrorists and after an enemy that is different than any enemy that we have been involved with before.
Different,
this is not a war of marching armies where they come out into the desert and stand or march forward so that you can hit this or that tank.
I grant
this is a shadowy campaign, and we are going to fight this war smart. The United States is not going to make the mistake that many others have made in Afghanistan of trying to fight a traditional, conventional campaign against an unconventional enemy. There is much that is going on behind the scenes, and there is much that you will see.
But Dr. Rice, did you expect that it would take so long?
This is a campaign that is going to take place both on the battlefield, in disrupting and destroying al-Qaeda camps, in disrupting and destroying their command and control, in devastating attacks against Taliban assets, and it is going to take place in countries around the world where we are going to disrupt these cells through intelligence and law enforcement.
All of that,
efforts.
if I may say, is of course just political assertion at the moment. Did you really expect that the Taliban and Osama bin Laden would hold out for so long?
I would just point people to the President's statements going all the way back to his address to the joint session of Congress. This is a long campaign. He said that from the very beginning. He mentioned the fact that this is a shadowy enemy that hides in holes and hides in caves. By the way, it's not an enemy that seems to be willing to come out and to face the world.
It's a shadowy enemy.
And so this shadowy enemy that we have to track down, that we're going to track down however long it takes, we are going to make certain that al-Qaeda cannot do the kinds of things that it did to the United States on September 11th. We're going to make certain that Afghanistan is not a base for terrorist operations.
Let me test that, Dr. Rice. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you say this is a shadowy enemy. You say you're in it for the long run. You're determined to win. In 10 days' time, the Muslim month of Ramadan starts. Your government has repeatedly said that you will continue the bombing, but everyone says that this is going to go against the grain of Islamic sentiment. So let me ask you, is this tough talk, or are you determined to defy Muslim beliefs?
We believe that Muslim beliefs are being defied by al-Qaeda. Muslim beliefs are being betrayed by people who would wantonly take the lives of innocents in the World Trade Towers. By the way, taking the lives of Muslims as well as Christians and Jews. We believe that Muslim law is being defied by the Taliban, which wantonly kills its citizens without regard. That is the attack on Islam, not
and
the
all
United
of that is
States.
true, no one contests it, but the
no war
fact of the
against
matter
Islam.
is, that you're putting a very strong strain on your front rank ally. General Musharraf has said that there will be a negative impact on Pakistan if the bombings continue. The Saudi newspaper Al Riyadh has even predicted civil war in Pakistan and the possibility of the general being overthrown. Are you going to risk all of that?
We are very satisfied with the cooperation of our allies in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And let me be very clear. We have no choice but to root out al-Qaeda, to make certain that the Taliban cannot harbor them. We cannot pause and allow them to plan another major attack against the United States. This is a war of self-defense. The UN Charter recognizes a war of self-defense. Everyone recognizes a just war when they see it.
But the cost is being paid by Pakistan at the moment. The fabric of that country is tearing itself apart.
The cost was paid by the thousands of American citizens who were going to work the other day, September 11th, and found themselves the victims of terrorist attacks by al-Qaeda and their supporters. That's how the cost was paid. Now, the Pakistanis have been terrific in supporting the coalition because they know what is at stake here.
He is regularly and repeatedly asking you to stop bombing during Ramadan. He even made this point to Donald Rumsfeld over the weekend.
President Musharraf has been very clear that he thinks the most important thing is for this campaign to succeed. And we are going to stay at it and stay at it with determination until we succeed. We cannot allow the terrorists to win. Imagine a circumstance in which the terrorists actually believe that they've won this war. This would be very bad for the stability of every civilized country in the world, Muslim and non-Muslim.
In Washington, Dr. Rice, your determination sounds like perfectly acceptable political rhetoric. In Islamabad, your determination sounds as if you're going to fight the war at the cost of the fabric of that society. The voice in Islamabad that is being heard says, Donald Rumsfeld has already accepted that the United States may not get Osama bin Laden. Then what meaningful gain will they get by bombing over Ramadan other than tearing apart the fabric of an already fragile country?
With all due respect, you misquote Donald Rumsfeld. He said it was going to be difficult to find Osama bin Laden and it would take time.
And he added that it's quite possible that you might not get him.
No, but we all know that we will get him. We arrested a terrorist a few months,
Donald Rumsfeld on television.
Let me finish.
But he did say on television, forgive me correcting you, he did say that it's possible you may not get him.
No, what the Secretary said is that Osama bin Laden will be gotten. It will take time. It will be difficult. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, an old American expression, he said, but we will get him. Several weeks ago, we arrested a terrorist who killed American citizens 12 years ago. It took us that long, but we got him. The United States is determined, and our determination comes out of the fact that this is a war of self-defense. Now, we believe that our friends in the region, including Pakistan, including Saudi Arabia, including others, understand that this was an attack not just on the United States, but an attack on civilized countries everywhere. Countries other than the United States are as vulnerable to these terrorists as we are.
But at the moment, Pakistan is going through instability of a type it has not experienced. Let me put this to you. The greatest concern about the destabilization that is potentially afflicting Pakistan is what would happen if its nuclear arsenal were to fall into undesirable hands. Have you got a contingency plan to take care of that?
We have every confidence in President Musharraf and what he is doing. We have every confidence in his ability to control his forces. Does that mean you don't have a contingency plan or you don't need one? We have every confidence in President Musharraf and his ability to control his forces. We believe that Pakistan is a country which the United States cares a great deal about its stability. And in fact, you will see when President Musharraf is here that the President is committed to making life better for the Pakistani people as a part of our concern about Pakistani stability. But Pakistan is a stable country with a President who is committed to the anti-terrorist campaign. That is why we are joined in this fight with President Musharraf and countries all over the world throughout the coalition who really understand what the true face of terrorism would do to them. I must put this to many people who are concerned about the stability of Pakistan and many people who are concerned about what would happen to its nuclear weapons. You're not giving them any assurance. You're simply saying that we believe nothing will go wrong. I'm saying to you that when Saudi newspapers like Al Riyadh are predicting that Pakistan could experience civil war,
when General Musharraf himself is saying that there will be a serious negative impact of the bombings continuing, your reply is simply to say, don't worry. Is that sufficient?
I'm saying that the United States government has confidence in President Musharraf. We have had with him recently Secretary of State Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. They came back confident in what he is doing, confident in the way that he is leading Pakistan, and confident in his support for the coalition.
Okay.
That is the position of the United States government, and when President Bush sees President Musharraf on Saturday, he will communicate to him our confidence in him.
Okay, in fact, let me ask you, talking about the military strikes on Afghanistan rather than the wider war on terrorism, what in your eyes would constitute victory?
We are going to pursue this mission by a plethora of means.
So what is the end goal that is victory?
Military means, financial means, intelligence means. We're going to pursue them by
Quite
all
right.
of those means.
But when will you know you've achieved the victory?
We will know that we have achieved victory when the Al-Qaeda network has been so disrupted and destroyed that it is incapable of the kind of global terror that it has performed. We will also know when Afghanistan is a place where terrorism cannot rise from its soil again. Now that does mean...
How will you know this? How will you know this? Because you haven't been able to topple the Taliban.
That does mean that in Afghanistan, we will need to see a post-Taliban government that is stable, that is representative of the many ethnicities in Afghanistan, and that can count on the world to rebuild Afghanistan in a way that its people deserve.
You should bring up the post-Taliban government. You're saying in a sense that, in fact, the emergence and establishment of that post-Taliban government will be the victory you're seeking. And yet, in India and Pakistan, there's a lot of concern about the United States' position on that future government. Do you believe that there is, for instance, such a thing as a moderate Taliban entity with a role to play, or do you believe that is an oxymoron?
The United States is not going to try and choose the government for the people of Afghanistan. We're working with the UN and our many coalition partners to try and bring about circumstances in which a multi-ethnic, broadly representative government in Afghanistan can emerge. Now, all of Afghanistan's neighbors need to feel secure because Afghanistan is a more secure place.
What happens when Afghanistan's neighbors like India, like Russia, like Iran turn around and say that a moderate Taliban is a non-existing entity, it is an oxymoron, and yet Pakistan insists that a moderate Taliban element be involved?
President Musharraf has said that he believes it is important that the Pashtun be represented in this government.
In the United States
we could not agree more that the Pashtun, as well as the northern tribes, need to be represented in this government. Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic patchwork, and it needs to have a government that is capable of bringing those people together.
Moderate Pashtun and moderate Taliban.
I believe that I said, and you can go back and look at your tape, but I believe that I said the Pashtun as an ethnic group will need to be represented in a post-Taliban regime. Now, we are looking to not ourselves, but to the Afghan people, to the many people in Afghanistan who have resisted this terrible government that treats its people with absolutely no regard. Let's remember the status of the Taliban before September 11th. This was a government with which very, very few people chose to have relations, and the few that have them have mostly broken them. This is a government that wantonly executes its people in a stadium that was given to it by the UN.
But that, in a sense, is known. That's history now.
No, that's not history. That's the basis from which we are starting. And it speaks volumes about why the Taliban allowed its territory to be taken over by foreigners, taken over by Al-Qaeda, to the detriment of its people. We think there's a better. We think there is a better future for the people of Afghanistan once this war is over.
Let me switch at this point and talk to you about Pakistan's role as a frontline ally alongside the United States in the war against terrorism. Do you have any doubts that that country might itself be harboring, possibly supporting terrorists?
We believe that Pakistan is a supporter in the war against terrorism. We believe that President Musharraf is doing everything that he can to support the coalition, and we are completely satisfied with the level of cooperation that we're getting.
6 weeks ago, the United States State Department declared that the Hizbul Mujahideen was a foreign terrorist organization. Last week, your own Justice Department has asked that the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed should be similarly designated. Now, these groups are based in Pakistan. They have offices in several Pakistani cities. Their leaders live there. and it's widely believed that they are funded and supported by the ISI. That being the case, how credible an ally in the fight against terrorism is Pakistan?
Pakistan is not just a credible ally, but an ally who is proving itself every day in its support for the coalition. President Musharraf has been forthcoming. He understands what is at stake here, and we are very satisfied with the cooperation. Now, as to the terrorist groups that will be listed, the United States has made very clear there is not good terrorism and bad terrorism. You cannot say that you hate Al-Qaeda and that you want to hug some other terrorist group. So the United States is going after global terrorism wherever it is found. And therefore, when we put together the list for financial controls, or when we designate countries as designate groups as terrorist organizations, we're going to do it on the basis of whether they deserve to be on the list. No other criteria.
Absolutely. Let me, in fact, talk about the three groups that I mentioned. One of them has already been prescribed by your State Department. Two others have been recommended by your Justice Department.
Yes.
Pakistan says they're freedom fighters. India says they're terrorists. What is the United States' own view?
Well, the United States makes an assessment of who belongs on the terrorist list, and as you said, there has been a recommendation. There is a process for looking at these organizations before they go on a list. But this is a list that is living and growing, and we are going to put on it organizations that belong to be on it.
People in India ask, how long will it take the State Department to act upon the recommendation of the Justice Department? Can you give me a sense of time?
It is a process that we have in place. The other group that was put on several weeks ago went through the same process. This is not a lengthy process.
You know what they say in India? They say in India that the only terrorism the United States cares about is the terrorism it experienced on September the 11th. Nothing else matters. That's why they're fighting the war. They want our help, but they're not concerned about the problem we face.
The United States has been in the fight against terrorism for a very long time. We've prescribed groups for a very long time on a terrorist list. We have sanctioned countries for their support of terrorism.
So when Indians say you're moving slowly on their problem?
Long before September 11th, the United States was involved in the fight against terrorism. September 11th gave new impetus to an international coalition that finally saw the face of what a true global terror network could really do, the evil that it could really bring.
Do you have a definition
and
for
so
terrorism?
we are actively engaged now with countries all over the world in rooting out global terrorism, and we're going to win this war.
Absolutely, but do you have a definition for terrorism?
The kind of activity that we have seen from Al-Qaeda and its kind, and some of the groups that are on the terrorist list, where civilian life is wantonly taken without regard to the fact that it is innocent life.
Dr. Rice, that is precisely what the Indians say has been happening in India for 10 years, and the United States hasn't bothered. They say it's happening still. It happened in October, and the United States is dragging its feet in proscribing those groups.
I believe that if you talk to the Indian government, they have been, in fact, very pleased that we have recently put GEM on the list, that we are exploring the other organizations
but
that were brought to us.
But you won't give me any deadline about when they will actually make it to the list.
I'm not going to give you a deadline because we have a process to go through. But I can assure you that it is a process that only examines whether a group should be on the list.
The Indian government has publicly and repeatedly said that they've received assurances from the United States government that when phase 2 begins, after bin Laden and the Taliban have been taken care of, you will turn your attention to the terrorism India faces. Can you confirm that you've given such an assurance?
We have already turned our attention to terrorism outside of Afghanistan. This is not a one-note war.
Phase 2 and India?
It's not a matter of phase 2. We have told the Indian government that we intend to fight terrorism wherever we see it. That includes in India, that includes in the United States. The fact of the matter is that September 11th gave a new impetus to the war against terrorism, but the United States has long been engaged in the war on terrorism.
But let me point out then a problem with what you've just been saying. You say that you will turn your attention to the terrorism that India's been facing. The problem is that India believes most of that emanates out of Pakistan. In phase 2, you will owe a debt of gratitude to General Musharraf. If you instead turn upon the groups he calls freedom fighters, you will undermine, embarrass, and possibly threaten his stability. How will you do that?
Let me be very clear. You said, not I, that we will turn our attention to. We have already, I said, we have already turned our attention to concerns about terrorist groups worldwide. That is why the terrorist list on financing of terrorism, the terrorist list on the designation and proscription of terrorism, includes groups that are not Al-Qaeda related. We believe that this is one large web in which they train each other, they finance each other, that the war on terrorism is indivisible. We will root it out wherever we find it. And we believe that countries around the world that see now what global terrorism can really do will have a new attitude toward terrorism. Let's be realistic.
Well, let's not talk about other countries. Let's talk about India and Pakistan, where you face a real dilemma.
Let's talk for a moment about what the United States found itself after September 11th. We found ourselves that we had cells within our country, that we needed to make new law enforcement
Dr.
efforts.
Price, come back to the people of India and Pakistan who are listening to this interview.
The people of India and Pakistan can be assured of the following. The United States takes the war on terrorism seriously and with determination, and there is no such thing as a good terrorist.
Absolutely, but that again to the people of India and Pakistan will sound like nothing more than political rhetoric. Let me explain to you the dilemma that they believe you face. On the one hand, you are committed to fighting terrorism, and that includes all the organizations identified by your State Department and your Justice Department. On the other hand, you are also committed to supporting and securing General Musharraf, and that includes not embarrassing him by turning on those he considers freedom fighters. How do you resolve that dilemma?
We believe that our relations with any country in the world begin with an understanding that the support of terrorists is unacceptable. That includes any country in the world, including Pakistan. I think that Pakistan, perhaps more than most, understands that global terrorism is a threat to stability and a threat to civilized countries. And so there is no reason to expect that our very good relationship with Pakistan is in any way going to proscribe our ability to deal with terrorism. In fact, it has been supportive of
that has to
and
be
helpful
tested, is it? At the
of our
moment, it's
support in
only an
terrorism.
assertion. That has to be tested.
Everything, of course, will be tested
Which
over
is, of
time.
course, what the people of India and Pakistan
Everything,
are saying.
of course, will be tested over time. But what is very clear is the determination of the United States to win this war on terrorism, the determination of the members of the coalition to win this war on terrorism, because everybody understands what is at stake here.
Now, during his visit to India and Pakistan, Secretary of State Colin Powell forcefully called for a resumption of the political dialogue between Delhi and Islamabad. However, Prime Minister Vajpayee has at least twice refused to accept General Musharraf's invitation to meet. He says that he first wants a prior cessation of what he calls cross-border terrorism. Do you understand his position, or when you meet him on Friday, will you be pushing him to start that dialogue?
The United States believes that dialogue between India and Pakistan is extremely important and important to stability in the region. We believe that any form or any way in which that dialogue can take place and is mutually acceptable to both parties is worthwhile.
Does mutually acceptable mean that Prime Minister Vajpayee is right in wanting a cessation of cross-border
No
terrorism?
one can force parties to sit down and talk. We believe that it is always a good thing to sit down and talk. We believe that dialogue is good. But the United States has said in every situation in which it finds itself asked a question like this, that the parties have to be willing.
Okay, one other quick question before we run out of time. You're also meeting General Musharraf on Saturday. Now, there have been two, at least, major strikes carried out by Pakistani-based jihadi groups in Srinagar. Up to 60 or 70 people have died. In the interests of the coalition, will you overlook this? Or when you meet the general, will you ask him to rein in these groups?
Well, first of all, the United States condemned these killings. Secondly, General Musharraf himself condemned
And yet they
killings.
continue, because October the 1 has been followed by at least 3 or 4 more incidents.
General Musharraf has condemned these killings. The United States will say to all parties that it is important to do whatever we can to make certain that terrorists cannot carry out their bloody work. We have work to do
And
to
you
make
will say
certain.
this to General Musharraf as well,
We
as
will
forcefully
say,
as you're saying it here at the
We will say
interview.
this to every head of state with whom we meet.
And if he doesn't like what you're
We
saying,
all have a part to play in this war on terrorism, and it really has two very important conditions. One is that you have to root out terrorism wherever you see it,
and secondly,
and secondly, you cannot care about one set of terrorists and not about others. We have said that. We believe that General Musharraf understands what is at stake here. And I want to say one other thing. I want to say one other thing. I want to say one other thing. We believe that an outstanding relationship, our relationship with India, is improving tremendously, that it's a strategic relationship of tremendous importance. It is not a zero-sum game with a good relationship
Dr.
with
Rice,
Pakistan.
for talking so openly, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
you.
you.